morning and welcome to Shattering Myths, a program devoted to the largest and fastest growing segment of society. To those of you who, like me, have come to realize that all of the world's religious, political, economic, and military institutions are corrupt, rotten to the core, even counterproductive. I am Yahowah. Our number, if you'd like to join us, anytime over the next 2 hours, toll-free, 877-300-7645. A suicide bomber blasted his way into infamy yesterday in a Turkish town near the Syrian border. 40-some-odd people were killed. Twice that number were mutilated. The government, of course, called it a terrorist attack, but the fact is that the government of Turkey is fundamentalist Islamic, Erdogan, and his political party is a religious party. The suicide bomber was a fundamentalist Muslim. The victims were socialists. It was a gathering of young socialists. There is a very small percentage of Turks who are socialists, just as in the Egyptian uprising that was said to have grown out of the Arab Spring. There was no Arab Spring. There was no mainstream thirst for or desire for democracy. All of that it was conceived by the media. But there was a very, very small portion sought out by the media of Egyptians that were socialists, as was the case in Tunisia. The fact is, though, that the percentages of socialists in Egypt and Tunisia represented probably half of 1% of the population, maybe 1%. In Turkey, the number of socialists is more, and it's more just because the heritage of the country and its proximity to Europe. The percentage of socialists in Turkey is probably more in the 3 to 5% range. So it's not unheard of in Turkey to be a socialist. But something in the range of 85% of Turks are fundamentalist Sunni Muslims. And therefore, the political influence, the societal influence of a socialist, a secular humanist, is nil. But nonetheless, they were meeting in Turkey, and the Islamic fundamentalist, working off of the Quran's edict to wipe all of those out to the last who do not submit to Islam, chose to believe the imam when he told the young man that if you wear this suicide vest and detonate yourself and you kill innocent civilians in a cowardly, despicable manner, that your God will be so enthralled with your murderous deed, with your lack of judgment, with your lack of morality, with your murderous and sadistic behavior, preying on innocent civilians, all of whom are unarmed, that your God will be so in love with and so enamored with that kind of behavior that, yes, this despicable God will grant you a despicable place to celebrate your despicable achievement. And that would be in the Islamic paradise where multiple virgins who maintain their virginity, which means they can be conquered and abused, not loved, will be there to satiate your every desire while you lounge on fluffy sofas and have all the fruits of your heart's desire and rivers that flow with wine. Of course, in today's world, this would be, save the virgins, would be a brothel. And so it is astonishing that anyone would be stupid enough to believe a religious fundamentalist who says that there is a God out there who is so depraved, that a God that actually created the universe, that had the intellect and ability and the creativity to conceive the universe and to author life was so reprehensible that this God would reward mass murderers, would reward those who cowardly walk into groups of women and children, of civilians, who are unarmed and unsuspecting, and that if you murder them and mutilate them and you die in the process, that your God is so perverted that he would reward you with perversion.
So what you're saying is he created life just to find the people that were best at ending it.
There you go. That's how stupid you have to be a Muslim. Yep. That's how ridiculous the Quran is. That's how
I've created all this stuff.
Morbid. Yeah. And Allah's cause is killing. Make no mistake. Allah's cause is repeated throughout the Quran. It's always described as jihad, and jihad is universally described as using all manner of weapons, laying in wait for an unsuspecting prey, and killing them. And killing them in despicable ways. Smiting them on their necks, which means decapitating them, crucifying them, and terrorizing them. Allah says he's a terrorist.
I think one of the most profound things and I learned this listening to you and IQ, one of the most profound things is that you never hear of, where's the only place that you hear about Allah?
Oh, in the Quran and in Islam.
But the only place that he's always where?
Always in hell. Always in hell. 100% of depictions of Allah in the Quran have him not just in hell, but
performing the tortures.
Performing the tortures. Yes. So, I just ask you a question. Why would you want to meet your God, such a God that spends all of his time in hell? So why would you want to go to hell to meet him? And number two, why would you do anything for a God that finds great pleasure, spends his time torturing the very life that he created? You just, as I said, to be a Muslim, you have to be a complete moron. And it's, as you say, if it weren't so sad, it'd be funny. And imagine now your life being so miserable. They're talking about the Chattanooga bomber. Or shooter that killed unarmed men there in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the media is now trying to present him as depressed and psychotic as opposed to a Muslim. But how could you be anything other than depressed if your God is a sadistic torturer? If your lone prophet was a complete failure at prophecy, and was a rapist and pedophile and an armed robber and thief and slave trader. And if the only God that you had ever considered spent all of his time in hell and couldn't wait to torture his creation, why wouldn't you be depressed? If you look at every Islamic country based upon Islamic principles, where there is no hope, there's no reason to live, there's no opportunity, particularly where women are treated like garbage. And I've used the term that they're treated like domestic animals because that's what the Quran and Hadith, how they depict women as domesticated animals to be abused. But that's not fair because our view of how we treat domesticated animals is so vastly different than the abuse that is hurled upon domesticated animals in the Islamic world, that it's just not fair. In fact, and one of the problems that American troops had in Afghanistan is that in America, we look at dogs as man's best friend. I've got a old dog that sits here and listens to my show faithfully every day. And yet in Afghanistan, they torture dogs because Muhammad didn't like dogs crapping in his mosque, which was open air and dirt floor. The mosque was simply what was the space left over from being rung with his bedrooms for his variety of children that he had in his harem. And the dogs would get in and crap on the floor and pee on it, so he said dogs were demons, and so Muslims torture dogs. But can you imagine being part of a religion where half the participants are treated like someone would treat a dog that they torture? And no wonder they're depressed. No wonder they
psychotic.
Psychotic. No wonder they're wanting to die a horrible death just to get out of this world. I would think by definition you would have to be psychotic to believe that the creator of life created life only so that he could reward people who were the best at ending life in horrible ways. I mean, you'd have to be psychotic to think that's true. You'd have to be psychotic to think the creator God of the universe spends all of his time in hell torturing people that he created. But how many suicide bombers does Islam have to furnish? And how many thousands upon millions of innocent civilian victims do they have to murder and mutilate? How many little girls do they have to enslave and turn into sex toys for their perversion? How many crucifixions do they have to perpetrate? How many decapitations? How many suicide bombings? How many terrorist attacks the Muslims have to perpetrate and claim in the honor of their perverted deity, Allah? Allahu Akbar. Allah is bigger, older, and greater. Before people finally say, the problem here is there's a common denominator. And 100% of these acts and these criminal behaviors, the kidnapping, the enslavement, the pedophilia, the rape, the suicide bombings, the mass murders, they're all being perpetrated by fundamentalist Muslims quoting the Quran. Maybe, just maybe, folks, the problem is Islam. The problem is the Quran. The problem is Muhammad. Particularly if you're a Muslim. Why don't you wake up to that? Rather than coming to hate someone who is willing to tell you the truth, who is encouraging you to think about the stupidity, the psychotic nature of trusting such a God. Wake up. Sticking with Islam and Bangladesh, a video was released of the grisly lynching. I don't know how there could be a lynching that isn't grisly, but nonetheless, the CNN folks decided to add the modifier grisly to lynching of a 13-year-old boy. The boy was accused, but not indicted, not tried, nor convicted of theft. 13-year-old boy. They lynched him. The clip shows the victim, Shamuel, and the reason he has a Hebrew name is that Hebrew is based, Arabic is based upon Hebrew. Alam Rajan, tied to a post and then beaten with a metal rod. They didn't just hang him. They, as cowards, as despicable, vile individuals, tied a 13-year-old boy to a post and then shouted, Allahu Akbar. Allah is great, as they tortured him with metal rods. The level of depravity required to do that is astronomical. But there's very few circumstances where an individual can be that depraved. To tie a 13-year-old boy to a post and then beat him with their iron rods. Most of the time when you have this caliber of depravity, this caliber of viciousness, of cruelty, it requires a mob mentality. The most predominant form of mob abuse throughout history, they've come in the forms of religious zeal. Religious zealots will do this kind of thing. And religious zealots in Christianity did it. Religious zealots and Muslims do it currently today. The second is political, patriotic zealots. They'll do it. military individuals and offsets of political entities like the U.S. CIA will torture. And the Roman Catholic Church, of course, sanctioned torture and did it for 1,000 years. The third is that military institutions in themselves will perpetrate great cruelty. Most militaries actually behave in such a manner that makes resisting them so painful, so much of a terrorizing effect that they cause the population to avoid rebelling against them because of the fact that they're so vicious in their deployment of terrorism. But apart from these human institutions, military institutions, political institutions, religious institutions, there are very few gangs that will be this kind of abuse. For example, a street gang that is now a criminal enterprise as opposed to a religious, military, or political enterprise. They will eliminate rivals. They'll kill their rivals. You very seldom hear of someone in organized crime or a street gang tying someone up to a post, a child up to a post. In fact, I've never heard of it. Having a street gang or someone in organized crime tying a 13-year-old boy or girl up to a post because you think they did something that you don't like, and then beating them and then lynching them. That kind of activity requires the group indoctrination that comes along with human religious, political, or military institutions. And in this particular case, it was purely religious. Because this was a large crowd that surrounded this. This was something that other people participated in. This is something that the onlookers thought, okay, no big deal. No one called the police. No one thought it was out of order. So you have to have an entire community. And in the case of Bangladesh, it's 98 or 99% Islamic. The whole community has to be part of the gang. And in the case of Islam, Muhammad created Islam as a criminal enterprise. And he himself, in the first time that he deployed his criminal gang, which was Badr, he not only kidnapped and enslaved some of the victims and attacked innocent people that had done nothing to him and who were essentially unarmed, certainly were not a military, and not only lay in wait for them and rob them. No, Muhammad actually mutilated them, and he tortured them, and then he gloated over having tortured them all night after the bloody affair was over. This is the kind of mentality that causes someone to be able to torture a 13-year-old boy. The footage of the lynching was recorded by one of the attackers, and it's widely viewed on social media networks. They were so proud, these Muslims, of tying up this 13-year-old boy and beating him with metal rods. They were videotaping it. Yes. How much abuse does this religion have to perpetrate before more people hold the religion accountable for its crimes? The footage of the lynching was, as I said, recorded by one of the attackers. The victim's pleas for mercy, or just a glass of water, were ignored by his attackers during the ordeal over the weekend. A vegetable vendor had been accused by the men of theft. So this 13-year-old boy was trying to earn a living by selling vegetables, and one of the attackers accused him of stealing. An autopsy at the medical hospital revealed that he died from severe head injuries. They hit him over the head with a metal rod. His body bore scores. That means over 40 impact marks with a metal rod. The way the boy was murdered was really unfortunate. over a dozen bystanders saw the brutality, but no one even informed the police. The city's police investigators stated. Dr. Sheikh, a practitioner of internal medicine originally from Pakistan, said that he was horrified. Anyway, we have a problem in America too. So I don't want to make it sound like the religion of Islam is the sole culprit and the abuse of innocent civilians. This story is out of Texas. Sandra Bland, an African-American woman, is now dead after she was pulled over for failure to indicate. There's video of the confrontation between the Texas police and this African-American woman, Sandra Bland. And I'm going to share with you what little I know about it. But this is another sad testament to the realization that our policing in America is way too deadly, way too aggressive, way too militaristic. You know, the indoctrination in the military has been since World War II, when it found out that the vast preponderance of American infantry, when they had another man, even in an opposing uniform, even though that other soldier was armed, that when they could look into the face of their foe, they would not pull the trigger to kill them. You know, most people are not predisposed to kill. And so knowing this...
Well, on that note, didn't they find that most people, when they were shooting at the enemy, they aimed high?
Oh, they would not, yeah. Most wouldn't pull the trigger. Most, when given the opportunity to kill a man and an opposing force, would not pull the trigger. And the
ones that did were aiming high.
Yes. So because they didn't want to look like they weren't willing to pull the trigger, but the numbers are in the high 90% of soldiers in World War II who were not willing to kill the enemy. And what you found is that the only way we could kill the enemy was with artillery, so that you couldn't see them, or aerial bombings, and we'd burn them alive because you could not see the anguish you were perpetrating.
Which is what we've turned our military into now.
Right.
With drones
Oh, exactly. And so for Vietnam, the War College in West Point came up with a scheme to indoctrinate our military so that whoever the government said was our enemy, they were dehumanized, so that you could not only kill them, and you could look them in the face and kill them, you could giggle while you were doing it. And you know, the footage from American Apache helicopters with their Gatling guns, and the video and the audio that goes along with it shows Americans giggling now as they kill. And of course, there's lots of pictures that have been posted of our troops standing with pride over civilians that they have murdered. And so Vietnam, that strategy was so over the top that our soldiers fired, and I think it was something in the range of 200,000 or 300,000 rounds of ammunition for every confirmed kill. I mean, they would shoot at anything, man. If a bird flew, if a snake slithered, if a leaf twitched, I mean, they were unloading automatic carbine or machine gun fire into it. And so we fired several 100,000 rounds per confirmed kill. So that was the result of that. But now for Afghanistan and for Iraq, what we did is we continued that, and we came up with a new enemy because the enemy was no longer wearing uniforms. So now they were insurgents. Insurgents. Yes, they were insurgents, even though they were civilians. And we designated insurgents as terrorists, and therefore, since you couldn't tell an insurgent from a civilian, you killed any civilian, they were simply labeled insurgents, and therefore it was okay to kill civilians. Okay to gun them down. In fact, you could take pictures with your boot on their head and your gun at your side as if you had just shot a prized game animal. So that mentality is now permeated our police forces and our federal agents, because a disproportionate number of those have come out of the military. You go from being shoot 'em up, bang bang in the military to you want a job in civilian life. Well, you're not equipped to do much of anything else. So what do? You become a cop. You become a federal agent. You know, and so this mentality of they deserve to die. If somebody challenges my orders, then they deserve to die. And that mentality is the mentality that led to the death of Sandra Bland. So a U.S. police dash cam video showing the arrest of an African-American woman who died 3 days later in custody has been released by officials in Texas. Heavily redacted, heavily edited. The footage of the 10th of July arrest shows Sandra Bland's car being pulled over for failing to signal, and then an ensuing confrontation with the officer. You know, Scott, I'm out driving about as much as the average bloke. My guesstimation, and I've done a number of cross-country trips, my guesstimation is that more than 50% of the cars that I follow or that I'm looking at coming towards me fail to indicate when making right turns, when making left turns, or when changing lanes, more than 50% of the time. I'm guessing that compliance with the law on indication of a turn is significantly higher than 50%. So if you're pulling somebody over for failure to indicate as a cop, it shows that as the cop, there is another reason that this cop wants to pull over this person.
Yeah.
Okay. White
saying,
cop, black woman. Now we do get into is this woman, was she pulled over because she was a black woman in a white neighborhood? Was that the reason she was pulled over by a racist cop? Because failure to indicate, you could, even if you do indicate, you know, doing it at the right time, I'll bet you it's higher than 50% of people could be pulled over every time they drive.
Well, it's definitely not something that you should be looking to take somebody to jail over.
Oh, arrest them for failure to indicate? Anyway, so for this to have escalated to an arrest, which then she didn't appreciate, they're robbing her of her freedom for a failure to indicate. And by the way, I would be belligerent too under those circumstances. That's absurd.
That's the part that on all these things, that's the part that's getting me, is that when did saying no become threatening?
Right.
Like
when does that become a crime?
Right. You had the professor get on the ground. No.
You know, if a cop asks me to get on the ground, no, I'm not going to get on the ground. And then your crime is resisting arrest because the cop is forcing you to the ground and manhandling you. You know, I thought we lived in a free society, and you were innocent until proven guilty, and that you can't have your liberty taken just because some cop has a grandiose view of his own superiority, and that if you try to defy their orders, that you're a criminal. I mean, you know, a huge percentage of people are incarcerated. This woman was incarcerated for resisting arrest. Why would when there's no justification for arresting you, why would resisting arrest be a crime? You know, that the kid at UVA, that really well-spoken, articulate African-American kid that was beaten to a pulp and then arrested in Virginia for allegedly having a fake ID and for drinking. He wasn't drinking. He did not have a fake ID, but yet he had to rehab all sorts of stitches to his head because they banged his head into the concrete, and they arrested him. And his crime, the reason he was put in jail and actually had charges brought up for resisting arrest, and you say, what's wrong with us? Why can't you resist arrest when you've done nothing wrong? Why is your liberty theirs to take?
Is that as a cop, you can't escalate. You're not supposed to be able to escalate things to get a response out of.
Well, here in this particular case, let's talk about escalation.
Well, in this particular case, he asked her to put out a cigarette.
Actually, the first thing he asked her to do, according to the video, was to get out of her car. Now she's been pulled over for failure to indicate, which is a nothing crime on a 1 to 10 scale of importance. I mean, this is a 0.5. Okay, and so if you want to be an a-hole cop and you want to give somebody a ticket for failure to indicate, write the damn ticket quickly, hand it to them through their window. Don't say 3 words to them. Don't badger them, and just go away. Now for failing to indicate, there is no reason to have this woman get out of the car. But the cop, he wanted her out of the car. And when she says, no, I don't want to get out of my car, you know what he said? And his statement is on the video. He pulls out his taser and he says, if you don't get out of the car, I'm going to light you up. Oh, my God. And this is a cop that ought to be thrown in jail for an extraordinarily long period of time. All right. The first thing I need to do is to announce that I was wrong and Scott was right. The first thing the officer, I was mostly wrong and Scott was mostly right. It was correct that this woman pulled over for failing to indicate, and the cop did write her the ticket while she was sitting in her car. She handed the cop her driver's license, and the cop wrote her a ticket while she was sitting in the car and handed her the ticket. Now, that should have been it. Now, what this woman did is it reminds me of something that I did the last time I received a ticket. In fact, the last 2 times I've received a ticket. I've received 2 tickets over the last 3 years. The first of those was I was a California highway patrolman. Gave me a Officer J on a motorcycle in Santa Barbara, California. I was in a drugstore parking lot. My son needed to pick up something cosmetic kind of an item. Maybe it was an allergy medicine, but there was something in the drugstore that he needed to pick up. He had a friend in the car, so he was in the back seat, which means that when I pulled in and there wasn't a parking spot that was available, so I'm pulled over to the side of the driveway for this drugstore, and I get out. I unfasten my seatbelt. I get out. I let him out because I'm in a convertible. It only has 2 doors, so I had to get out to let him out. And he walks into the store, and lo and behold, one of the cars that's in the parking lot now wants to pull out, and I'm blocking them. And so I can either stay there while my son, for another 2 minutes, and my son comes out, or I can be a decent person, and I can pull out of the parking lot and then turn right around and come right back in. And so I choose to pull out of the parking lot, and I come right back in. To pull out of the parking lot, I'm going to be on the street for a grand total of about 10 seconds. I don't put my seatbelt back on because I've got to get out of the car again when I pull back into the parking lot to let my son in the back seat. So I'm in the street for 10 seconds. This highway patrolman pulls on his siren, motorcycle cop, and he gives me a ticket for failure to be having my seatbelt on. I said, I'm in the street for 10 seconds, and I'm being a nice guy to pull out to let somebody out of the parking lot. You've got nothing better to do than give me a ticket for, under those circumstances, not having a seatbelt fastened when I had the seatbelt fastened when I drove here, and I'll have the seatbelt fastened when I drive away from here? He said, yeah, you can't go on a public street without a seatbelt. I'm writing you a ticket for it. I said, you've got nothing better to do with your time? That they trust somebody with a gun and this badge that has no better judgment than that? And so I'm not swearing at the officer. I'm not threatening the officer. But I'm telling the officer that what he's doing here is stupid. Now, I did it one other time. My wife and I were driving across country, and a cop pulled me over for 9 over the speed limit on the interstate. And, I typically set my cruise control for 8 or 9 over when I'm on the interstate. And I've driven across country, but back and forth 20 times, always with the same technique. Never had a cop ever give me a ticket for 8 or 9 over the speed limit. That's kind of the comfort zone. And I said, I told this cop, I said, you really pulled me over. It's a beautiful sunny day. Streets are dry. There's nobody around. And you're pulling me over for between 8 and 9 over the speed limit. I said, I've never had anybody do that. Why would you do that? And if I was doing something reckless, if I was going, 20 over, pull me over. But 9 over? Who are you kidding? Why would you do that? Is this little community such that you're funding your schools through abusing drivers? And so I'm giving him lip. I'm saying that the job you're doing, I don't appreciate. Threatening, no. Cursing him, no. He has a gun. I'm not going to antagonize him any more than to say, what I think you're doing is ridiculous. So this woman, she, I have a gift of gab, I guess. I'm willing to engage anybody in talking, and it's very uncommon for me to go to vulgar speech. I've done it more times than I would like to admit, but I'm not likely to go there. Well, this woman, she gave this officer, which she should have, lip. She should have given him lip. She probably cursed at him for giving him a citation for failure to indicate. And he told her to put out her cigarette, which she was smoking, which she has no right to do, and then to get out of the car. Why? Why? So you can scold her, so you can lord yourself over her, so that you can threaten her, because she's secure in the car. And when she refused to get out of the car, he's pulled out his taser and said, I'm going to light you up.